I know you work with Gwen Green,
Sure.
who happens to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Under-recognized?
Right,
I
right.
mean, very little people know about Gwen Green.
But she was very close to Dr. King. And she was probably the reason that I knew him, because I was a friend of Gwen's. And often when he was, as soon as he got here, he'd call Gwen and Dolores Castillo.
And who's Dolores?
She was, not just Castillo, I'm not sure exactly her name. Anyway, it was a friend who, someone else that he called. And so we would often, after he finished all of his appearances, we'd sit down, he'd come by somebody's house and we'd sit down and talk.
And you said that earlier. You would just come by and informally, people would just talk.
Yeah, people would have people to their house and they'd talk about issues. You know, late at night, you know. And I had a friend, Naira Long. Her name was Naira Harden at that time. And her mother would always let us invite people to their house on Dalton. And people would just come there and sit and talk. And Gwen was also a friend of Naira's. But Gwen also was the reason that I did become involved with the civil rights movement. And that I did go to Atlanta.
How did you meet Gwen?
I don't know. I knew Gwen for years and years. I don't know. It was just a group of people that I just knew her for a long time. Well, you know what? Maybe through the Urban League. I don't know. Might have been through the Urban League. Her husband was a officer, worked for the Urban League.
Okay. What can you say about her? Because people don't know who she is.
She was part of the movement in a real way. She was there in Atlanta. She was there at SCLC when it started. She was very close to all of the people. Clarence Jones, all those people. She was very close to.
And you were with her like maybe throughout a course of a day. What would happen during one of those days? Can you kind of remember?
Well, she had total access to the King's family. She was close to all of their employees. She would go in the office and go by their home. And she was just totally involved in the, you know, at that time there was not all this stratification. You know, every person who was involved and who was a worker had access to everyone. You know, I mean, it wasn't a matter that Jesse Jackson and Lewis were all, and Dr. King were all by themselves over here. They were among all the workers. And going to dinner or whatever it was, or they were involved. I mean, it was not the kind of a stratification. The civil rights movement was not a stratified movement. It was one where it reached out, and everybody who wanted to be involved was involved. And on a personal, day-to-day talking position and experience. So even though I was in California, I knew most of the people who were involved in Atlanta because if I was there or if they came here, we saw them.
So, you know, we look at this, I think historically, we look at it as this big structured thing, whereas I know SNCC was kind of like an informal, or it basically worked on consensus as opposed to all this bureaucracy. And you make it sound like the movement
was definitely consensual. It wasn't like a stratified.
Oh.
There were officers. Obviously, there was Dr. Abernathy. There was, I can't remember all the named people. As I say, Jesse was young, and he was involved, and Clarence was, of course, the speechwriter.
Clarence who?
Jones.
Okay.
And he's the person who really was involved with the ideas. He wrote Dr. King's speeches.
Oh, I'm not familiar with him.
You aren't? Well, there's a lot that's been written about Clarence Jones recently. He's up in Stanford as a scholar.
Okay.
And I have a dream was not his words, but if you read some of the articles about Clarence Jones,
Okay.
he was a Wall Street lawyer, and obviously young, African American, and very, very bright, and became part of the movement. And he was a Dr. King speechwriter.
Okay.
But what I've read recently was that even though he wrote the speech, Mahalia Jackson was in the audience and screamed, "Tell us about the dream." And then "I have a dream" he put in at that point. That was not Clarence's words, and Clarence says that.
Okay.
But you have to read about Clarence Jones.